then whatever's on the screen is part of the video. So now we're making a video right now with integers. And I don't change how I teach. I still make jokes. I still get off topic. I still have fun. Just because we're having a video go on YouTube at the end doesn't matter. You still need to ask questions just like normal. All right? He's making fun of me because I'm a Rough Riders fan and the Bombers beat the Rough Riders this weekend. So I still, and if you ask questions, this mic basically only picks up my voice. So if you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to ask a question, it doesn't pick up anybody's voice but mine. So now what I'd like you to do in your notes is, this is stuff I'd like you to write down. So we're going to take out our notes. We're going to write down integers. We've got page 1. We've already put a date on our notes. And integers are positive and negative whole numbers. So you know your basic numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are integers. 0 is an integer. But also our negative numbers. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Those make up our integers. So sometimes we talk about them being our positive and negative whole numbers. And we do a lot of math, adding and subtracting with integers and with whole numbers. I mean, you start at school as one of the first math things you do is add positive numbers. 1 plus 1, 2. 1 plus 3, 5 plus 5, right? That is a lot of grade 1 and grade 2. And then you add subtracting. 8 minus 5, 7 subtract 4. And then as you went into middle school, they start introducing positive and negative whole numbers as well. And then we got to doing adding and subtracting with integers, and things sometimes get a little bit confusing at that time. So here, what you're writing down, one strategy to help you with adding and subtracting is to use a number line. Now, that's pretty straightforward. A number line, does everybody know what? I don't know why that's highlighted. I want to unhighlight it. There. Whew. Didn't like that blue line. One strategy to help you with adding and subtracting is a number line. Okay? A number line is a pretty straightforward thing. It's just zeros in the middle. You got your numbers positive this way, and then your negative numbers go this way, right? Negative, and it keeps on going in both directions. And so if you had something that you know how to do, like 2 plus 3, if you were using your number line for 2 plus 3, which nobody probably would because that's something you know already. 2 plus 3 is 5. That's easy. But what the number line means is that you would start at 2, and then plus 3 means you have to go 3 more in this direction on your number line. And if you count 3 more on your number line, 1, 2, 3, you'd get to 5. And it makes sense that 2 plus 3 would be equal to 5. And there's lots of ways that you can visualize adding. It's like, you know, you have 2 apples and you add 3 more apples. How many apples do you have? You have 5 apples. This is like some of the very first math that you would have done way back when you started school. Okay? What gets a little bit complicated and what gives a lot of students in grade 9 issues is when we start adding integers, right? What does it mean to go 2 plus a negative 3? All of a sudden we get into like, oh, this is where I start to make a few mistakes. Okay, can we get through this part of the notes and then as soon as we get to the work part, go quickly and then come back? Okay, then go. So adding a number moves things along the right. Anytime we add, it goes this way. Anytime we subtract, it would go this way. So if you had 5 minus 4, you would start at 5, and you would go 4 back on your number line, and you get to 1. 5 minus 4 is 1. Seems easy, seems straightforward. Now, I'm going to move to the next slide. Is everybody finished on this slide already? Yeah? So here's our first example. We've got a -3 plus 8. So if we were using our number line, -1, -2, -3, this is where we're starting. We're starting at -3. And the plus sign means we need to add, and every time we add, we move to the right, because we're making it bigger. So if I add 8 to -3, where am I going to end up if I move 8 spots to the right? Now, one of the things that I do, here, we can count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? We're going to end at 5. Now, in math, you might say, for some of these, and for all of these later on, I'm not going to want you to draw a number line every time. But having the number line right now sets us up for understanding what's happening. And if we understand what's happening, then when we try to do shortcuts or when we try to do things faster, it will be easier because it makes sense to us. Because I believe sometimes, you probably have some things in math you've learned so far that you went, oh, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't know why that happens, and so because I don't know why it happens, I find it's harder to remember. Things that don't make sense are harder to remember than things that make sense. Right? Okay, so -3 plus 8 is 5. Our first example. Oh, there's so much more math I want to do with that one, but I'm trying to just stay calm. Do one example at a time. Are we ready for the next one? 5 minus 9. Again, this sometimes causes us issues because if we learned in math, you know, you think back, when they taught me subtracting, they always used some sort of object. Right? I used apples earlier, right? You have 5 apples and you take away 9, all of a sudden, boom, that doesn't make sense. Have you ever tried to do that? Have 5 apples and take away 9? You run out of apples. So we have a problem there in that sometimes when we try to make sense of something, it's easy to do 5 minus 3. I have 5 apples, I take 3 away, I'm left with 2 apples. That's easy to see. But if I do 5 minus 9, all of a sudden, it doesn't make sense with apples. But there are other things in life where we need negative numbers. Do you know any places where we use negative numbers? One of them's coming up in like 2 months. Hopefully 2 months, maybe even quicker. The weather. What happens in Canada in the winter? The temperatures are negative. Canadians are better at negative numbers than Americans because we have colder winters. I don't know if that's true, but it might be, right? If the temperature was 5 degrees in the afternoon and at night it's going down 9 degrees, how much is it going to be in the morning? -4. And so there are some situations where it makes sense to use negative numbers. And what we do in math is we learn the skills, and then we try to find out where we do them. Yeah, one second. All right. Perfect. So on our number line, when we draw this out, put 0 in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is our starting point. And again, Once you get good at this, you won't want to draw a number line every time, but at the beginning it might be helpful. We're at 5. Because we're subtracting, we're going in this direction, and I need to go back 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. I'm going to end at negative 4. Now, one of the things that is tempting for people to do is because they're used to subtracting, like 5 minus 3 is easier than 3 minus 5. When they see something like this, they just do 9 minus 5, they write 4. And it's a very common mistake for doing math in grade 9, in middle school. But if you think about the number line, I'm starting at 5. I'm subtracting, so I'm going backwards. If I go down 9, I get to negative 4, right? And maybe some of our examples that we used to use to try to make sense don't make sense. I have 5 apples and I take 9 away. That no longer makes sense, right? But if we say, well, there are some things that do make sense for this. It's 5 degrees out. It goes down 9 degrees. What's the temperature now? It's minus 4. And we're good at that because we're born in Canada. So these are basic adding and subtracting, but this one subtracted, our answer ended up in the negatives. Now, what happens when we have negative numbers involved? So now, add a little bit of complexity. Negative 4 plus a negative 3. Whew. So a negative number does the opposite. And when you're adding a negative number, because it does the opposite, adding is supposed to go this way. And if the negative number does the opposite, it now switches it to go back. And anytime we go back, that's like subtracting. So did you hear a math teacher, did your math teacher in the past ever say adding a negative is subtracting? But if you just memorize that, that sometimes makes things a little bit hard. Question, Cherish? If you're not feeling well? Okay. Yeah, Miss V will go with you. So if I have negative 4 plus negative 3. On my number line, right, here's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4. This is my starting point. I'm starting at negative 4. Now adding normally would go to the right, but then adding a negative, the negative always does the opposite. So that means I'm going to need to go in this direction. And going back 3 more, 1, 2, 3, negative 5, negative 6, negative 7. Here's where I'm going to end. Negative 4 plus negative 3 is negative 7. Those are ones that it's so easy to make mistakes with. Find your lid. So sometimes we can even write here, if adding a negative is the same as subtracting, this question, negative 4 plus negative 3, is the same as negative 4 minus 3. That would also equal negative 7. Because if I had the question written this way, negative 4 minus 3, I would still start at negative 4. Minus means go backwards. I would still go back 3 and end at negative 7. When I have negative 4 plus negative 3, well, plus means go forward, go to the right. The negative does the opposite, so now I'm going back. It's the same as subtracting. So whenever we're adding and subtracting, that first number is where we're starting, and then we have to figure out which direction we're going to go. subtracting a negative number is like adding. And if you think about doing the opposite, okay, subtracting would say, subtracting means go back, but if the negative does the opposite, we're going to go forward, and that's like adding. On our number line, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's my starting point at 7. And now I need to go this way. Oh, my starting point was at 8. Luckily, I can do this. Da, 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 da. Wouldn't it be nice to do that on your notes sometimes? Right? Our starting point was at 8. And since we're subtracting, which normally goes back, but we're subtracting a negative, which does the opposite, we're going to go forward. I need to go 7 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What number is this going to be? If I'm at 8 and I go 7 more. 50. Nice. Hey, now, adding above 10, like whenever things go above 10, there's a couple of things that you can do. Okay? One of the things that I like to do when adding, when I have 8 and I want to add 7 to it, I say to myself, well, I know it would take 2 to get to 10. And then I need to go another 5 to make 7. 10 plus 5 is easy, that's 15. So there are some strategies we can use in our adding as well to make things easier. That's one thing I really like about math, is I'm always trying to figure out what are different things we could do to make things easier. How can we add to make things easier? How can we multiply to make things easier? So we end up getting, as our answer, 15 here, and we can write, and some people really like to do this, anytime they're adding a negative or subtracting a negative, they say, well, subtracting a negative, that's the same as adding. So I could have written this just as 8 plus 7, and 8 plus 7 is 15.